Over the past day, we've witnessed the exciting outcomes of two impressive small lunar missions. JAXA's SLIM, the intelligent moon explorer, successfully executed a soft landing on the lunar surface. However, post-landing, it seems to have experienced a roll and failed to assume the correct orientation, leaving its solar panels without power. If you glance to the right, it seems like the spacecraft may have ended up in a less than ideal position, as some might amusingly describe it. A big shout out to Japan for becoming the 5th nation to achieve a successful lunar lander deployment. Fantastic accomplishment. Yet, it's evident that the lander's power is gradually diminishing. At this point, there's no time for celebration. The team needs to put in some serious work to extract all the data and ensure a smooth transition into a dormant state. Let's go back a few months when the spacecraft lifted off from the Tanegashima Space Center on board a reliable rocket accompanied by the X-Rhythm to Space Telescope, a sophisticated X-ray capable telescope. Following launch, it entered a prolonged low-energy orbit utilizing advanced astrodynamics. The spacecraft journeyed to one of the Sun-Earth Lagrange points, balanced itself, then adjusted its orbit to head back towards the Moon, eventually entering lunar orbit. During its orbit, the spacecraft captured images of the lunar surface, mainly for engineering purposes to validate the onboard hardware. Once it reached the Moon's surface, it provided valuable visuals of the lunar landscape, adding to its public relations value. After spending several months in space and successfully reaching lunar orbit, it initiated its braking burn upon reaching the Moon's surface. Alright, so picture this. The spacecraft is making its way to the landing spot from the south. As it descends, it cleverly adjusts its position at different stages, allowing it to scan the surface and continue its descent. Picture it slowing down at intervals, going from 5 kilometers, then 500 meters, down to a mere 50 meters. During this descent, it's doing a scan to pinpoint the perfect spot for a safe landing and then steers toward it. Just before the grand touchdown, it's meant to release its 2 rovers. The plan is for it to land on its side, introducing a bit of rotation right before touching down, so it elegantly folds onto its wheels. Well, that's the plan. But as you might have guessed, things didn't go exactly that way in this case. Now both rovers are out exploring the surface. These rovers aren't immortal though. They have a limited lifespan on this lunar road trip. We've got a helpful one that can communicate directly with Earth, and then there's this cute spherical buoy that can roll around. The landing site is around here, near a crater called Theophilus to the north. It's a bit tricky to see on Google Moon, but there's a slope there. If you squint a bit, you'll notice a slope of about 10 degrees at this spot. That's why they had to come up with a slightly different landing technique compared to your typical spacecraft. So, as it gets super close to the surface, the spacecraft tilts a bit using its thrusters, gently swaying back and forth on its feet. Now, can we decipher the spacecraft's orientation based on the cool telemetry display it offered? Keep in mind, the spacecraft is approaching from the south. The incline of the surface is gently sloping towards the south. It's essential to bear in mind that the spacecraft deliberately descends close to lunar dawn, with the sun positioned in the east. Consequently, on the display, you can observe the solar panels aligned to the east. However, as it approaches the surface, there is a rotation maneuver taking place. On the right side, there's an adjustment in the rotational attitude, causing the solar panels to turn towards the south side of the vehicle. Understanding this orientation, the X display on the left, facing south, is represented as negative when going east and positive when going west. The Y display, facing east, has a negative Y for north and a positive Y for south. Although the Moon is only 1¼ light seconds away, the slight delay necessitates autonomous operation. Notably, the spacecraft evaluates the landing area at different altitudes, making decisions on where to touch down. Even at 4 times normal speed, you can observe pauses at various altitudes for surface assessment and decision-making. At the bottom of the screen, 2 throttle meters indicate the power supplied to the main engines. 12 thrusters are in use, and 3 rotation meters, omega Y, omega Z, and omega X, display the attitude and rotations. Given that the spacecraft likely only has gyros measuring the rate, it accumulates these rotations to determine orientation. It's worth noting a subtle off-angle descent, likely a deliberate move to nullify lateral velocity. Achieving zero lateral velocity upon touchdown is crucial for proper positioning. The display doesn't precisely reveal zero altitude, making it challenging to confirm the correctness of the rotation. However, expectations for a pitch-over maneuver just before touchdown are not met. Instead, a 3-degree pitch and a -4-degree yaw are observed. So we've got a freeze-frame moment here, but the actual data readings stay stuck for a few seconds. It's not totally unexpected, though. When the spacecraft is spinning and its internal indicators are pointing in different directions, we knew there'd be a break in the data once it landed. Checking the video, I noticed about 8 seconds of no data. Next up, the pitch rates go off the charts. There's a bit of a roll, and you can see the thrusters working hard to balance out the 3 rotations. My guess is the spacecraft touched down before doing the power pitch-over move for the actual landing position. Also, I'm thinking the yaw direction matches the spacecraft's eastward movement, which lines up with its thruster orientation during the final descent. Of course, this is all based on public data, which might not be perfect. Sequential rotations from rate gyros can have errors. But if we can trust this data, it suggests the solar panels are facing away from the sun, pointing westward. That could explain why the spacecraft is slowly losing power. But here's the hopeful part. If this orientation is right, and the spacecraft is facing up with the solar panels toward the west, then the sun might start shining on them in about a week or even less. That could potentially bring the spacecraft back to life and maybe even give us some cool images. Fingers crossed. You know, we've got those rovers on the lunar surface and they're set to explore independently, hopping around and sending back some exciting images. I'm really eager to see those visuals. It's a massive success for Japan, and the team deserves major kudos. Now, switching gears to lunar landers, let's dive into the Peregrine Astrobotic mission. The Peregrine lander took off on the Vulcan rocket, and the launch was a triumph, delivering payloads precisely to their intended orbit. However, post-launch, the spacecraft ran into a bit of a hiccup. It seems a valve designed to pressurize the tanks had a helium pressure issue. It opened but didn't close, causing a propellant leak in the system. This leak led to the spacecraft starting to spin after separation, creating some tense moments as the team worried about power running out. Fortunately, they managed to align the spacecraft properly, but a moon landing was no longer on the cards due to the limited performance. In the following days, they gradually gained control over the leak, preventing further issues. However, the persistent small impulse from the leak caused the perigee of the orbit to decline, bringing the spacecraft closer to Earth's atmosphere. Thankfully, Astrobotic kept up excellent communication throughout this challenging situation. Everyone was eagerly supporting this mission, witnessing progress as issues were addressed. Although the goal wasn't reaching the moon, the team made a point to activate payloads for data collection in deep space. Surprisingly, they managed to retrieve valuable data. Despite successfully showcasing spacecraft maneuverability with limited propellant and a leak, the decision was made to safely drop the spacecraft into the atmosphere. Instead of letting it drift off into deep space, they ensured it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere thousands of kilometers east of Australia. Although no re-entry imagery has been seen due to the remote location, telescope images from SE, a space domain awareness company, depicted the spacecraft descending and possibly venting or firing its engine. Firing the engine would reduce propellant, minimizing mass, and ensuring a higher likelihood of burning up upon re-entry, preventing debris from landing on the surface. Astrobotic also shared a captivating image of Earth from the spacecraft, carefully maneuvered to block the sun behind a strut, revealing a beautiful crescent view of Earth. Excitingly, this year promises a plethora of lunar lander missions. Intuitive Machines will launch Nova C in May, with more to follow, including Blue Ghost Viper. NASA's commercial lunar payload services will contribute numerous new missions to the lunar surface, and we hope for continued success in these endeavors.